What's up, guys? Today we have a very special video for you. We're going to talk about some advice that all beginner quarterbacks need to hear. So we're going to talk about everything from a grip that help you throw a perfect spiral to how quarterbacks can add 10 to 15 yards of deep ball distance on their throw. So I hope this video helps you guys out. Let's get started. Now, before we get into this video, fellas, we're going to be coming out to 15 different cities this offseason for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver camps. So check out that very first link in the description below if you guys would like some more information on how you could sign up to train with myself and my staff of coaches. We are coming out to San Francisco, California. That camp is completely sold out, but then we'll be coming out to Miami, Florida. That camp has only about 5 spots left remaining. Then we're coming out to Las Vegas, Charlotte, North Carolina, Portland, Oregon, Dallas, Texas, Nashville, Tennessee, Chicago, Illinois, Buffalo, New York, and then we're going to be coming out to Atlanta, Georgia, Houston, Texas, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Detroit, Michigan, Boise, Idaho, and Los Angeles, California. So again, fellas, more information on that, how you can sign up, check out that very first link in the description below. Let's get started with this video. Now, when it comes down to a grip for a perfect spiral, everybody's grip is a little bit different. I'm not going to sit here and say your grip has to be exactly like mine. I have probably the most traditional and most classic grip that you could have, but there are a couple key things that every quarterback should have with their grip. And it's not how you put your fingers on the thread, but this is what works best for me. So I like to put my ring finger on the second thread. A lot of guys I've seen put their ring finger up a little higher, some maybe a little bit lower. Again, I like it on the second thread. I like my pinky finger in this little groove right here. Some people like the pinky finger a little higher, but most important thing is that I just have control on the ball. Whatever grip is comfortable for you and you can spin the ball, that's what I want you to have. Now, second thing, you have to make sure 2 things. The last finger to touch the ball is the index finger because that is your spiral finger. That's the flick of the ball. And that when you release the ball, you have a gap of air between your palm and the football. You should be able to fit your finger in between your palm and your hand, and you should be absolutely fine on this thing. So if that's what you could do, index finger has a little bit of pressure on the ball, gap between your palm and the ball, you will be just fine spinning this thing. But that is the perfect grip for QBs. Now, I am a firm believer that a quarterback is built from the ground up. If you're training a beginner quarterback or you are a beginner quarterback, I think you should start with your base first before you even worry about the upper half. So by base, I mean essentially below your waist. What should your stance be like as a quarterback? So if I'm going to throw, and let's say I'm throwing out here to the left, there's 2 specific keys that I want. Number 1, I want a slight bend in my knees. I see a lot of quarterbacks out there that stand very tall like this. It is very tough to generate any force from your lower body when you're standing like a pencil. So we want a slight bend in my knee, and I want my feet to be inside of my shoulder frame. I don't want to be outside of my shoulder frame to where my knees have this natural cave in, even if I got really strong legs. When you are wide like this and you go to throw, and we're going to get into the hips and the shoulders and all that stuff later, but when you are super wide with your base, it is very hard for us to rotate from my hips. When your feet are inside your shoulders, it is very easy for us when we take a short stride to fully rotate with my hips to get more power on the ball. So that's where you want to be. You want to have a slight bend in your knees, feet inside your shoulders, and last but not least, you want about 60 to 70% of your weight on your back leg, nice and light on the front foot. I will explain why you want to get there on these next couple clips. Now, one of the common mistakes that quarterbacks will make, especially beginner quarterbacks, when they get to this perfect base, like we were saying, is they will have a long baseball-like front stride. Now, remember what we said. We didn't want to stand with my feet outside my shoulders because why? Can't rotate at your hips enough, right? So when you're in this base and you're here and you take this really long step with your front foot, you're not generating as much rotational force from your hips. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. If you're a baseball pitcher, you guys take this long step off the mound and you're using your hips, you're separating your upper body from your lower body to generate power. Why can't quarterbacks do it? There's 2 reasons. Quarterbacks are throwing further and quarterbacks have to throw with a heavier ball. So you have to get your legs and your hips more involved with this throw rather than relying a lot on this like linear force that a pitcher would have to do throwing downhill. So we want a short stride. But honestly, forget about the hips for a second. The short stride needs to happen is that quickens up your release. Guys, as you get older and older, I know you're a beginner watching this, but as you get older and older, the game gets faster and faster. And the longer your stride is, the longer your release is. You physically cannot throw from the pocket, with a long step without this front foot getting down. This front foot has to be down so the hips can fire, speeding up the path of your arm. So we need to take a short front stride. So we need to get out of the mindset as a beginner quarterback of, I'm going to step to the target. Let's think we want to step down. I want to get to this perfect base, 70% back, feet inside my shoulder frame, and I want to step down. How quickly can my toes make contact with the ground? So how quickly can my hips fire through to get the ball out of my hands as fast as possible? So now, we briefly mentioned it throughout the course of this video. Our hip rotation is where I generate power as a quarterback. But not only is the hips important for power, throwing the ball further, it takes pressure off of your arm. And that is ultimately the goal as a quarterback. Remember, as pitchers, they talk about it a lot. Pitchers only have a certain amount of throws, right? Before their arm gasses out, their arm starts getting tired out. Same thing as quarterbacks. And not to mention, throwing a heavier ball and usually throwing further than a pitcher has to do off the mound. So it is very, very important that we engage our lower half in the throw, not only for power, but again, to take pressure off my arm. So how exactly do I do that? So it comes down to having your weight back like we talked about. Good base. Remember, it starts from the ground up. You got to have a good grip like we mentioned first, but everything mechanically starts from the ground up. So when I get into my stance here and I got this back foot under my shoulder frame, 70% back, I step down. What we want to think about is like somebody's got their hand on the front part of your shorts and they are pulling you open. Now, when they pull you open, that should get your back hip to fire through. And if your upper body has proper mechanics, which we're going to get into in a second, you will be able to generate power. But when we take that short stride, I don't want to go up. I don't want to try to just drive with the back hip. I want to think my front hip is pulling me open. So that brings the ball through and that takes that pressure off my arm so I engage my whole body in this throw. Now, if you guys take away one thing from this video, I want you to take away this point that I'm about to make. It is not about just your hip rotation. It is about the timing of your hip rotation in the throw. So anybody can rotate with their hips. I feel anybody, I don't care if you're a receiver, lineman, running back, quarterback, you can all get to that perfect base, 70% of your weight on your back leg, and you guys can all rotate, right? But you see how when I did that example of hips flying through, my shoulders also flew through at the exact same time. That is not what we want as quarterbacks. Quarterbacks generate power from something called torque. Torque and hip and shoulder dissociation, aka separating your upper body from your lower body. I'm sure you guys have all seen a baseball swing before, right? You're in the batter's box because baseball hitters and quarterbacks generate power in a very similar way. Throwing a football is more like hitting a baseball than throwing a baseball. So I'm in the batter's box. Pitcher throws to me. I take a step to him. Does all my body weight go forward at the same time and the bat come through? No, you keep the bat back here, shoulder loaded, you step, then you pivot, hips fired through, and that brings the bat through. That's torque. Same thing as a quarterback. And that is why when you guys take that short front step, it is important, like we mentioned earlier, to have weight loaded on your back leg. And I'll explain why, because it can help you separate the shoulders. So you have weight on your back leg. Remember we talked about stepping down? When you step down, your shoulders and your hands should separate and go back. Keep that front shoulder loaded. Don't overdo it, but keep it slightly loaded. So now, when you think about pulling that hip open, that hip can fire through before the shoulder, before the elbow, before the ball. They call it a C curve. You see how my arm and my leg make a C, a letter C? That's how you know you're throwing the football correctly. When that hip can go through before the shoulder. That takes pressure off the arm, that engages your body with the throw, and that's how you can be a more efficient passer. It's about the timing of your hips. So fellas, you guys have all seen Dak Prescott do that drill. He's working on exactly this. Your weight stays back. You step, maintain weight loaded so you can be here. So many quarterbacks have been taught wrong. They have been taught to push. Guys, when you push, all your weight goes forward, and guess what you can't do? You can't go back with your shoulders. It's impossible. So your shoulders end up beating your hips, and you're not using your hips properly. You might be rotating, but you're rotating at the wrong time. So we need to make sure. Weight is back. We're here. Steps stay back. Hips fire through. Ball trail is nice and behind. Now we're going to talk about that follow through. So now, another reason why your hip rotation is important is that you do not have to throw the ball with your upper body, aka your head and your shoulders at your release point. So when you go to throw, your body is split down a midline. It's an imaginary line that goes down the middle of your body. So when you go to throw, an old school method that a lot of quarterback coaches would teach would be to take your front elbow and swing it down for power. But when you swing down, what does that do? You're like on a teeter-totter with your upper body. This goes down, that gets pushed up. Your head dips, that gets pushed up. It's outside of your body frame, so if you let the ball go too early, it could shoot high. You let it go late, it could go low. Or guys used to teach, hey, take your front shoulder and rotate and replace. But what that does is when you have your hips rotating and your shoulders rotating, your arm flies outside the frame because that midline is pulled off. So when you guys go to throw, there's two spots that you want to try to get to. Head steady, hand up by your face like you're eating a sandwich, and your shoulders stay parallel. You want to be here. Shoulders parallel, head steady, hand by the face. Now, this is going to feel awkward if you don't use your hips properly. If you don't stay back, if you don't stride and stay back, separate the shoulders, hips fire through, you're not going to be able to do this. So, We have to have the lower body first before we worry about the upper body. Think eating a sandwich, think shoulders parallel so your release can stay inside your frame, and then we could do the follow through that we all know and love. You guys have all heard flick the booger, throw darts, extend your wrist. This doesn't happen, the extension, if I'm flying open, I come across. If I'm flying up, I come down. I'm not extending. So we have to make sure we use our lower half properly to have the discipline with the upper body. All right, guys, really want to thank you for watching. I hope this video helped you guys out. If you're a quarterback and this video gave you some value, we would love to have you out to one of our off-season camps like we mentioned. So check out that very first link in the description below. If you guys would like some more information on how you could sign up for one of our off-season training camps, coming to 15 different cities, so I'm sure we're coming to a city near you. So again, very first link in that description below, fellas. I'll see you guys next time.